I still remember the first time I watched the bodycam footage. It was a simple living room, beige carpet, dated furniture, half-open blinds letting in the late morning sun. A man sits on a couch, quiet, still, a silver revolver pressed against his right temple. His name was Jeffrey Parker, and he was about to die, not by his own hand, but by a bullet from a Huntsville police officer. Let me take you back to May 2018. Huntsville, Alabama. A quiet, working-class neighborhood not far from the Tennessee River. The kind of place where front lawns are trimmed with military precision and everyone knows the name of the mailman. Jeffrey Parker lived alone on Doremus Avenue, in a one-story brick house with peeling paint and a rusted mailbox. He was 49 years old, divorced, no kids, a systems engineer, they said, smart, polite, kept to himself. But he was unraveling. Friends said Jeffrey had been different that spring, withdrawn, anxious. His co-workers noticed he was missing shifts. One neighbor told me he heard Jeffrey sobbing in the backyard a week before the shooting. No shouting, no rage, just a kind of quiet despair that hung in the air like humidity. You don't call the police for that, but maybe you should. At 4:17 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, a dispatcher at Huntsville Police got a 911 call. The voice on the other end was calm, but broken. I have a gun. I'm thinking about ending it. I'm just tired. He gave his name, his address. He wasn't threatening anyone else. He wasn't screaming. He just wanted someone to come, maybe to stop him, maybe to see him. 2 patrol officers responded. Officer Genisha Pegay was the first through the door. She wasn't new to crisis calls. She'd been trained in de-escalation. She entered with her weapon drawn, but lowered it when she saw him. Jeffrey didn't move. He didn't aim his gun at her. He just looked at her, a broken man, exhausted. What happened next would change everything. Within minutes, a third officer arrived, William Ben Darby, 25 years old, 2 years on the force. Tall, square-shouldered, a hard stare. He wasn't part of the original call. He heard the radio traffic, geared up, and joined. Darby had a reputation, intense, aggressive, a by-the-book cop with a military edge. Some colleagues admired that. Others feared it. Darby walked in with a shotgun. Not a sidearm. Not a taser. A 12-gauge police-issued pump-action. The official report says Officer Ben Darby entered the house at 4:26 p.m. The bodycam timestamp confirms it. 9 minutes after Jeffrey Parker's 911 call. By then, Officer Pegay had been inside for nearly 2 minutes. She was doing what many believe she was trained to do, talk. Slow things down. Keep the man alive. Let's break this down. The front door of Parker's house opened into a narrow hallway. To the left, the living room. That's where Jeffrey was. He sat on a tan couch, near the window. His revolver rested in his right hand, muzzle against his temple. His body language, and I've replayed it frame by frame, was passive. Still, terrified, yes, but not aggressive. Pegay stood several feet away, in the doorway. Her gun was holstered. She wasn't yelling. She asked Parker questions softly. Are you okay? Can we talk? Do you want someone to come sit with you? He didn't say much. He didn't wave the gun. At one point, he looked at her and whispered something inaudible. Then Darby arrived. He approached from behind Pegay. His shotgun was already racked and ready. The moment he stepped into the hallway, his tone shifted the entire atmosphere. You can feel it in the video, like someone had thrown a grenade into a quiet room. He shouted forcefully, "Point that gun at me, and I'll fucking kill you." Pegay turned, startled. She told Darby she had it under control. Darby wasn't listening. He ordered her to get the hell out, said she wasn't standing in a safe position, that she was doing it wrong. This moment, this tactical conflict between 2 officers, is at the core of everything that came after. Pegay didn't argue. She backed up. Darby stepped forward, took her place, and zeroed in on Parker. He screamed, "Drop the gun. Do it now." Parker didn't move. He didn't aim the weapon. He just looked at Darby. The kind of look you give someone who's already made up their mind about you. And then, a tiny shrug. That's what the prosecution would later argue. A defeated, almost indifferent shrug. Darby fired. 1 shot. The recoil slammed his shoulder back. The blast tore through Parker's face. He slumped to his side instantly, gun slipping from his fingers. The room fell into silence, except for the frantic calls over the radio. Shots fired. Subject down. Request EMS. But I want to focus on what happened in the seconds after the shot. Officer Pegay looked stunned. The third officer on the scene, whose name is less frequently mentioned in reports, moved toward Parker's body but stopped short. No one immediately gave aid. No one rushed to stop the bleeding. It was as if they had entered a different reality, one where the goal wasn't preservation, but domination. The gun was no longer a threat, but the man holding it had already been declared one. What makes this moment unbearable to watch and impossible to forget is the clear contrast in approach. Two officers. Same scene. Same man. Same gun. One saw a life still hanging on by a thread. The other saw a threat that needed to be neutralized. Darby later said he feared for Pegay's life. That Parker could have raised the gun at any second. That hesitation could have meant a dead officer. In court, his defense used the phrase, split-second decision in a high-stress environment. But here's what I saw. Pegay wasn't afraid. She wasn't retreating. She was speaking, connecting. Her training emphasized de-escalation. Darby's, as I would later discover, prioritized command presence and the assumption that any armed subject is moments away from violence. That philosophical split, right there, in that narrow hallway, ended one life, ruined another, and shook a city to its core. I went back to that street a few weeks after the shooting. I stood in the same place Darby did, looked down the same hallway, imagined what he saw. But I couldn't stop thinking about what Pegay saw. A man, not a suspect, not a criminal, just a man with a gun and a breaking heart. And I began to ask myself, how did two officers walk into the same room and see two completely different realities? That question would lead me straight into a deeper, darker layer of this case, one that has less to do with Darby and more to do with the way we train those we send to help. There are moments in reporting when you stop reading witness statements and start replaying them in your head like scenes from a film. The hallway inside Jeffrey Parker's home became that kind of space for me, not just a corridor in a modest Alabama house, but a pressure chamber where three different instincts collided, and one pulled the trigger. The official floor plan of the house shows a tight hallway, no more than 3 feet wide. The front door opens straight into it. About 6 steps in, on the left, is the entrance to the living room, no door, just an open frame. From that angle, Parker would have been partially visible from the hallway. Sitting on the couch, gun in hand, angled slightly toward the window. Here's the tactical breakdown. Officer Pegay entered first. She advanced down the hallway and paused at the threshold of the living room. She had her service weapon drawn, but quickly lowered it. Her voice, recorded by her Bodycam, remained steady. She was engaging Parker verbally. No commands, no threats, just talking. Officer Taylor, the third officer on the scene, arrived moments later. He stood back, didn't take lead, didn't interfere. He carried a ballistic shield meant for high-risk entries, but didn't deploy it forward. He seemed unsure, caught between the calmness Pegay had established and the intensity Darby brought with him. Then came Darby. He moved fast, controlled, purposeful. He was carrying a Remington 870 shotgun, standard issue for Huntsville PD in 2018. When he stepped inside, he didn't ask for a situation update. He didn't wait. He immediately ordered Pegay to retreat, claiming her position was tactically unsafe. In his own report, Darby wrote, "The officer was in a dangerous line of fire. Subject was armed. I took command of the scene as lead officer." But according to multiple court testimonies, Darby was never designated the lead. He self-assigned that role the second he arrived. Pegay complied. She backed out of the hallway, visibly shaken, her calm momentum broken. Darby stepped into her place, squared up to the doorway, and shouted, "Drop the weapon now. Drop it." Parker didn't move the gun, didn't flinch, just looked at him. Then the shrug. The Bodycam frame captures it. Shoulders lift, almost imperceptibly. It wasn't defiance. It was resignation. And then boom, the shotgun fires. The frame jolts. Parker's body slumps left, a spray of blood painting the armrest. From Darby's entry to the shot, 11 seconds passed. 11. I watched the footage dozens of times. Not out of morbid curiosity, but because something felt wrong in the pacing. No pause. No reassessment. No attempt to hand off or renegotiate control. Why? Because Darby was operating on a different script. Not one written by his fellow officers, but by training manuals, academy instructors, and a worldview that saw any armed subject as an imminent killer. I spoke to 2 former Huntsville officers who trained with Darby. One told me bluntly, "They drilled it into us. If someone's got a gun and isn't dropping it, they're a threat. Doesn't matter where it's pointed. Doesn't matter how they're sitting. You don't wait for them to shoot first. That mentality works in ambushes, in armed robberies, in hostage rescues. But in a suicide call? That's where the hallway became a trap, not for Darby, but for Parker. A trap set by policy, speed, and fear. After the shot, there was confusion. Taylor didn't move. Peggy, audibly rattled, tried to re-engage the scene. No one gave immediate aid to Parker. They waited for paramedics, who would arrive minutes later. Too late. Far too late. The Internal Affairs report noted something chilling. Darby never approached the body, never checked for a pulse, never spoke again to the man he just shot, as if the moment ended when the trigger was pulled. But I couldn't let it end there. I went back to that hallway with a retired police tactics expert. We walked the space. He pointed out how narrow the angles were, how ballistic shield could have blocked the line of sight, how Darby could have paused behind cover, how time, just 10 more seconds, might have saved a life. I asked him, was this a justified use of force? He looked at the floor, shook his head slowly, and said, it was legal, but it wasn't right. That hallway in Jeffrey Parker's home wasn't just a scene. It was a collision course between two policing philosophies, one that believes in slowing things down, and one that demands quick, unquestioning force. And trust me, the verdict didn't bring closure. Trials are supposed to answer questions. But the deeper I went into the trial of Officer Ben Darby, the more I realized this wasn't a search for answers. It was a fight over the very meaning of justice. The charges came fast. Within days of the shooting, Huntsville's district attorney, Tim Gann, announced that a grand jury had indicted Darby for murder. That alone shocked the community. In Alabama, like most of the country, it's rare for a police officer to face criminal charges for a shooting, let alone a murder charge. From the start, lines were drawn. The prosecution argued this was a textbook example of excessive force. They emphasized 3 points. Parker never pointed the gun at anyone. De-escalation was working until Darby intervened. The threat had not escalated, Darby had. Gann told reporters, bluntly. This was not a split-second decision. It was an unnecessary use of deadly force against a man who needed help. In court, the prosecution leaned heavily on the Bodycam footage. They played it repeatedly for the jury, paused it, zoomed in on Parker's shrug, highlighted the 11 seconds between Darby's entry and the shot. But the defense had its own powerful weapon, the badge. Darby's lawyers claimed he followed his training, that Parker's refusal to drop the gun made him a lethal threat, that Officer Pegay had misjudged the danger and put herself at risk, that Darby acted not out of malice, but out of duty. They brought in use-of-force experts, including former police instructors. They said Darby was right to escalate, that hesitation kills, that officers must act on perceived threats, not wait for bullets to fly. And then came the most controversial move of the entire trial. Huntsville Police Department supported Darby fully. The police chief testified in his favor. The city paid for his legal defense. The mayor issued a statement calling him a hero who had been unfairly targeted. I spoke with several officers off the record. Some were furious. Others felt betrayed. But a few agreed with the brass. He followed his training, one told me. If we punish him, we punish the whole department. But others pushed back hard. Jeffrey Parker's family sat through every day of the trial. His sister wept during the footage. His mother refused interviews, but issued a written statement. My son was not a threat. He needed someone to care. Instead, he got a shotgun blast. Outside the courtroom, protests were small but persistent. Community activists demanded better mental health response training. Some brought signs that read, "Talking saved lives," until it didn't. But inside, the jury listened and deliberated. It took 6 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty. Murder. Darby stared straight ahead when the verdict was read. No visible reaction. His wife sobbed in the back row. The courtroom remained silent. No cheers. No outrage. Just that heavy air you feel when something irreversible has happened. Then the backlash began. The mayor of Huntsville, Tommy Battle, called the verdict a disservice to law enforcement. The police union blasted the prosecution. Conservative commentators framed Darby as a victim of anti-cop hysteria. But what stuck with me was what one juror said after the trial, anonymously. We're not saying he's a bad person. We're saying he made a terrible decision, and someone died because of it. It's rare for a jury to convict a police officer. Rarer still in the Deep South. But this case wasn't about race, or riots, or a viral video. It was about an armed man in mental crisis and a split in philosophy over what a badge really means. Darby's sentencing was set for months later. The prosecution wanted decades. The defense wanted probation. The city wanted this to go away. But the public, they were still trying to figure out what had just happened. Some called it justice. Others, betrayal. And under it all, a single question. If Darby did exactly what he was trained to do, then who, really, is responsible? Because the truth is, Darby wasn't the first to shoot a man holding a gun to his own head. And unless something changes, he won't be the last. The deeper I dug into Ben Darby's case, the more I realized this wasn't just about one man and one bullet. It was about the culture that shaped him, and the mindset that pulled the trigger long before his finger ever did. Darby believed he was doing the right thing. Not just legally, but morally. He told investigators he feared for his fellow officer's life. That Parker could have turned that gun toward her, or him, in a split second. He said he followed his training. And in a way, he wasn't lying. That training started at the Huntsville Police Academy, where recruits are taught a principle known as the 21-foot rule. The idea is that a person with a weapon can close a 21-foot distance in less than 2 seconds, faster than most officers can draw and react. The message? Don't wait. Don't second-guess. Act first. Survive. But in practice, that training becomes something more dangerous. It creates a worldview where anyone holding a weapon, even one pointed at their own head, is treated as a live threat. One former officer told me, "You hesitate, you die." That's what they drilled into us. He wasn't talking about war zones. He was talking about suburban living rooms, about mentally ill men like Jeffrey Parker. Darby didn't invent this mentality. He was shaped by it, reinforced by it, rewarded for it. He had been involved in a previous use of force incident. It was reviewed internally and cleared. After that, he was promoted to field training officer, the one teaching others how to handle volatile situations. When I looked at his record, a pattern emerged: decisive action, aggressive posture, minimal tolerance for ambiguity. In the police world, that's not a flaw. That's considered leadership. But there's a cost. I found 2 other cases, one in Arizona, one in Mississippi, where officers shot and killed people during suicide calls. In both, the subject never pointed the weapon at anyone else. In both, the justification was fear. The training said, weapon visible equals immediate danger. Mental health advocates have warned about this for years. That police are being asked to be social workers, therapists, and warriors, all in the same shift. But when you train someone like a soldier, you shouldn't be surprised when they behave like one. And that's exactly what Darby was. He had never served in the military, but his posture, his command presence, the way he moved and spoke, it mirrored tactical training designed for combat. High speed, low tolerance, control-based. He didn't see Parker as a man needing help. He saw him as a threat to be eliminated. The tragedy is, in his mind, he did everything right. After the shooting, he didn't flee. He didn't panic. He followed protocol, secured the scene, gave his statement. And when the department backed him, it only confirmed what he already believed. He had acted as he was taught. It wasn't until the indictment that cracks began to show. For the first time, someone said no. Not just no to his actions, but no to the culture behind them. That made this case bigger than a trial. It became a referendum on modern policing, on what we expect from officers in moments of crisis, and on what happens when 2 philosophies, protect versus control, meet at the wrong end of a barrel. One of the most haunting things I found was in a police training manual used in Alabama just 3 years before the Parker shooting. Under the section for dealing with suicidal subjects, it reads, "Remember, suicide by cop is a real and dangerous threat. Maintain command presence. Do not let emotions cloud your response." But what if the lack of emotion is the problem? What if we've taught an entire generation of officers that compassion is weakness and hesitation is fatal? What if Jeffrey Parker wasn't a tactical failure, but a moral one, by a system that never gave him a chance? When I asked Parker's sister what she wanted people to remember, she didn't mention Darby. She said, Jeffrey was a kind man. He loved jazz music. He called my mom every Sunday. He was hurting. That's not a crime. Then she paused and said, but in this country, sometimes it gets you killed. Darby would be sentenced months later. He stood before the court, dressed in civilian clothes, no longer protected by the uniform. He didn't apologize. He didn't beg for leniency. He simply said, I believed I was protecting my fellow officers. The judge gave him 25 years. No probation. No early release. A full quarter century. Inside the courtroom, Parker's family wept. Outside, a crowd gathered, Some in support of Darby, some calling it justice, some shaking their heads at the whole damn thing. Because in the end, nobody really won. A man who needed help is dead. A cop who thought he was doing his job is in prison. A police department stands divided. A city carries the scar. And for the rest of us, all we're left with is that hallway, those 11 seconds, and a single devastating question. If everything went according to training, then why does it feel so completely wrong? I went back to Jeffrey Parker's house one last time. The porch was overgrown. The blinds were drawn. No signs of life. Just a weathered mailbox and the faint outline of crime scene tape long since removed. I stood on the threshold where 3 officers once stood, one trying to save a life, one trying to control it, and one who ended it. Inside, the hallway was quiet. The blood had been cleaned. The furniture gone. But something still hung in the air. Not guilt. Not horror. Something heavier. Absence. This is where it all came undone. After the sentencing, I spoke with a handful of officers still on the force. Some were furious. Not just at the verdict, but at what it symbolized. One told me they threw him away. 25 years for doing what we were all trained to do. Another shook his head. He wasn't wrong. He was just the one who got caught. And yet, something deeper had shifted. For the first time, officers were being forced to reckon not just with what they were taught, but with what those teachings cost. For decades, the emphasis had been survival, speed, control. But in the aftermath of Parker's death, the conversation started to change. Mental health response training in Huntsville was re-examined. A new crisis intervention team was formed. Officers were encouraged, not ordered, but encouraged to prioritize de-escalation. To wait. To talk. To listen. It was too late for Jeffrey Parker. But the cracks in the armor had begun to spread. Still, not everyone welcomed the shift. The mayor, who had once called Darby a hero, refused to walk back his statement. The police chief stood by his officer until the end. And in many corners of the country, the verdict was seen not as justice, but betrayal. Because to some, a guilty verdict for an officer doesn't represent accountability. It represents danger. That hesitation now carries legal risk. That if a cop waits too long, someone might die. But if he acts too quickly, he might lose his badge or his freedom. That tension between force and restraint, between law and morality, isn't going away. But the people caught in the middle? They're not numbers. They're not statistics. They're men like Jeffrey Parker. He wasn't a perfect man. He was depressed. He was scared. But he didn't hurt anyone. He didn't threaten anyone. He called for help. And in a just world, help should mean more than a body bag. I think about what 11 seconds really is. It's a breath, a heartbeat, a final chance. And we lost it. We lost a man. We lost trust. We lost the illusion that everything that's legal is also right. That everything trained is also humane. That the badge alone justifies the shot. In the end, Ben Darby was sentenced to 25 years in prison. But the real sentence might be this: a system forced to confront its own reflection and not liking what it sees. When I left that empty house on Doremus Avenue, I turned back once. The door stood open. A warm breeze moved the curtain in the window. For a second, it felt like someone might still be sitting on the couch inside. Waiting. Hoping. But there was no one left. Just silence. And a question we still don't know how to answer.